And welcome back, everyone. When it comes to your transition, it's easier to believe that the problems are out there. The job market, the timing, the way civilians don't get it, or the lack of clear pathways. And all of that feels justified. But step back and think about it for a minute. Two people can head into transition at the same time. Both of them with similar experience, similar resumes, similar networks. And they could come out the other side with completely different outcomes. The difference doesn't start with opportunity. It starts with the questions they're asking. Many of us never realize this part. We think transition is about finding answers. What job? What company? What path? But the answers you get are only as good as the questions you ask. If your questions are surface level, if they're reactionary, built around protecting who you are right now, your plan will be too. And that's where things start to get less clear. Just enough to make you wonder why something that looks right maybe doesn't feel right. So before you start looking for the next step or the next version of yourself, there's a better place to start. And it might not make you comfortable. The struggles in transition, they aren't because you don't have options. It'll likely be because you might be asking the wrong questions. But before we get deeper into this, let's take a quick break. As a first responder, control isn't optional. It's how you do your job. But when it comes to buying or refinancing a home, most lenders don't get your world. Police Mortgage does. They specialize in working with first responders, walking you through the process, breaking down your options, and helping you lock in competitive rates without the runaround. Take control of your financial future with people who have your back. Visit policemortgage.com or call 312-499-8878. Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. There's a big difference in asking the right questions. For example, we tend to ask, what kind of jobs are out there? Where we should be asking, am I actually prepared for what comes next? Or we ask, who's hiring people like me? Instead of, what don't I understand about this process yet? The difference can seem harmless, but it's not. Because better questions have a way of doing something. They expose things. They expose your gaps, your assumptions. The possibility that what's worked for you up to this point might not carry over the way you think it will. And that doesn't feel good. You've spent years, maybe even decades, getting good at what you do. There's a level of certainty there, even when things are difficult. But when you start asking better questions about what comes next, that certainty can start to weaken. Now you're not just looking at opportunities. You're looking at whether you actually understand them. You're not just thinking about your experience. You're questioning how it translates. You're not just assuming you'll figure it out. You're forced to consider that maybe there are parts of you that you haven't considered or put enough effort into yet. That's where most of us pull back, because it's uncomfortable to acknowledge our deficiencies or our limitations. So instead, we stay in a safer territory. We ask questions that keep things at the surface. But underneath it, you're avoiding the questions that would actually move you forward. Because those questions come with a cost. They might force you to admit that you're not as prepared as you thought. They might force you to rethink a path you've already started leaning towards. They might force you to see that the version of success you've been holding on to might not actually be success for you. And here's the other part of that situation. Avoiding the better questions doesn't remove uncertainty. It just delays your exposure to it. Then, when it finally does show up, it's not going to care about your feelings. It's just going to show you what you should have been asking earlier. And by then, your options are limited. Your time is shorter. Your margin for error is smaller. So the issue isn't whether you're asking questions. It's whether you're asking the ones that actually cost something for you to face them. And if you listen to the kind of questions most people ask when they start thinking about what's next, there's a pattern. It usually sounds something like this. What jobs fit my background? What positions pay the most? What roles would I qualify for right now? What companies are hiring people like me? On the surface, those sound like solid questions. But look a little closer. They're all built around the same thing: position, title, outcome. They're focused on where you land, not what it actually takes to function once you get there. Because chasing a title feels like the right thing to do. It gives you something to aim at. It gives you a sense of direction. But it also lets you skip over the harder questions. Questions like, what does that job consist of day to day? What skills are expected that I don't currently use or have? How do people in that role get evaluated? What does success actually require in that environment? What happens if I get there and realize it's not what I thought? Those questions don't feel as good. They slow things down. They complicate things. They force you to sit in the details instead of just chasing the outcome. So it's easier to stay focused on what's familiar. You'll start looking for the civilian version of what you've already been. But here's where that becomes a problem. The civilian side doesn't organize itself the same way. There's no guarantee that a title means what you think it means. There's no guarantee that your experience translates the way you expect it to. There's no guarantee that the role you'll land will value what you've spent years building in the same way. And there's a point where this stops being about curiosity and it starts becoming about consequences. Because every question you ask is doing something, whether you realize it or not. It's shaping what you pay attention to. It's filtering what you ignore. It's guiding the decisions you make next. And over time, those decisions compound. If your questions stay surface level, your plan will be surface level. Because you never force the plan to go deeper than the questions driving it. But when it comes to transition, most of us assume that because we've handled complexity before, we'll handle this too. And maybe you will. But that assumption lowers the standard of the questions you're asking. Instead of pressure testing your plan, you just start accepting it. Instead of challenging your own thinking, you start reinforcing it. Instead of looking for friction, you start looking for confirmation. And the more that picture forms, the less likely you are to question it. It stays easy to build around it. Not because it's the best option, but because you've already started investing your efforts into that option. And when the plan is built on weak questions, it carries blind spots. However, those blind spots won't show up immediately. They're going to show up later when you're already committed. When you're already in the role, trying to reconcile what you thought it would be with what it actually is. And by that point, it's not about planning anymore. It's about adjusting. Sometimes subtly, sometimes forcefully. But either way, you're reacting instead of choosing. That's the difference. The quality of your questions doesn't just shape your plan. It determines whether you're stepping into something you understand or something you're about to learn the hard way. And that's what makes this part dangerous. Because in most instances, you won't step into something and immediately think, damn, I made the wrong call. At first, you might think you got the outcome you were aiming for. Because on paper, it works. And for a while, that'll be enough. You'll settle in. You'll start learning the environment. You'll tell yourself, it just takes time. Every new role feels like this in the beginning. And that's true, to a degree. But then small things start to show up. You realize the way performance is measured isn't what you expected. The things that made you effective before don't carry the same value. The pace, the structure, the way people communicate and talk to each other. It's all just a little off from what you thought it would be. Overall, everything technically works, but it doesn't quite fit. So now you start adjusting, trying to make it work, because you already feel committed. It becomes No longer about asking if it was the right move. It's about making it the right move. And sometimes that works, but many times it doesn't. Because what you're trying to fix isn't a surface level issue. It's the result of questions that you didn't fully ask on the front end. And now you're learning the missed information in real time. That's the second order effect. It's not that you made a bad decision. It's that you made a decision without complete information. But once you're inside it, your options change. You can stay and adapt. You can leave and reset. Or you can sit in that middle space where you're functional, but you're not aligned with the work. That's where a lot of us end up. And the hard part is, to everyone else, it can look like you made the right decision, that you're successful, which makes it even harder to then question it. Because now it's not just about you. It's about explaining why something that looks right doesn't feel right. All of that traces back to the same place: a lack of better questions when there was still room to ask them. However, here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough. Asking better questions isn't just about getting better answers. It's about getting your control back. Because right now, whether you realize it or not, the questions you're asking are either putting you in the driver's seat or putting you in a position where you're reacting to whatever shows up. And most of us, we don't notice that until the shift happens. It feels like you're being proactive. You're looking at options. You're having those conversations. You're thinking about what's next. But underneath it, you're waiting. Waiting for the right opportunity. Waiting for something to click. Waiting for clarity to show up on its own. That's not control. That's rolling the dice that something lines up. And hope is not a plan. Better questions change that. Because the moment you start asking questions that actually challenge your assumptions, you stop chasing what looks right and start testing what actually holds up. You stop asking, what can I get into? And start asking, what do I actually understand about this? You stop asking, would they hire me? And start asking, would I even want this once I'm in it? That mindset change is important because now you're not just evaluating opportunities. You're evaluating your own thinking. You're forcing yourself to confront things earlier. The gaps in your understanding, gaps in your preparation, gaps between what you assume and what's actually true. And that's not comfortable, but it's controlled. There's a difference between walking into uncertainty blindly and walking into it with your eyes open. Better questions don't remove uncertainty. They give you a way to move through it without getting blindsided by it. And when you start operating like that, something else changes. You stop needing everything to feel certain before you can act. You don't need perfect clarity. You don't need every answer lined up. You just need enough understanding to make a deliberate move. That's where people's transition experiences start separating. Not based on experience, not based on their background, but based on how they think. Because one person is waiting for the right situation to arrive, and the other is shaping their path by how they're approaching it. Same environment, same uncertainty, completely different method of attack. And the difference isn't luck. It's the questions they're willing to ask and the ones they're not willing to avoid. So regardless of your transition window, use your available time. Ask better questions before the pressure shows up. Challenge your assumptions before they harden into decisions. Get honest about what you know and what you don't. Time isn't something you get back once the clock starts moving faster. So the question isn't whether you'll ask better questions, because you know you will. The only variable is when. and what it costs you by the time you do. Let's take another break, and when we come back, I'll go over the specific transition group tips. There's a moment in life when you realize it was never about you. Grind, spelled G-R-N-D, is different. There's no I in it on purpose, because the mindset was never about ego. It's about the mission. Started by a former Army Ranger, it's not about where you are. It's about how you show up. Different lives, different pressures, but the same mindset. Grind isn't clothing you wear just to look good. It's a reminder of why you keep going when it gets tough, and you keep putting in the work when no one's watching. For the early mornings, the late nights, the reps that no one sees. This isn't just fashion, it's fuel. Because real work isn't loud, real effort doesn't need applause, and real purpose doesn't quit. Head on over to thegrndcollective.com and use the promo code TRANSITION15 for 15% off your order. So now this is where it gets a little more specific. Because the questions you need to be asking aren't the same if you're staring at transition in less than a year from now, compared to somebody who's a few years out, or somebody whose transition is so far away that it's easy to push it off. But here's the constant. No matter where you are, the goal isn't to ask more questions. It's to ask better ones. Close range group. If you're less than a year out, or maybe it's happening right now, ask better questions about opportunities and preparation. Don't ask, what can I get into right now? Start asking, what does this actually require? And where am I not ready yet? You don't need more options. You need clearer visibility. What do operations actually look like in that role? How is someone in that role evaluated? What's missing between where you are today and what that job actually demands? That's where your time should go. Because at this point, guessing is going to cost you. And the more honest you get about gaps, the more control you get over how you close them. Medium range group. If you're sitting in that 3 to 5 year window, ask better questions about yourself. This is where most of us stay surface level without realizing it. We know what we've done and we know what we're good at. But we haven't really asked, what do I actually want and need to carry forward? What kind of work fits how you think? What kind of environment do you operate in best? What are you willing to tolerate and what are you not willing to tolerate? Because if you don't answer those, you'll default to what's familiar later. And familiar doesn't always mean right. This is where you get ahead of that. Long range group. You're early in your career. You've got a decade or more before your transition. Ask better questions about the future. Not in some abstract, where do I see myself someday kind of way. More like, what kind of life am I building towards, especially without realizing it? Because every decision you're making right now is shaping that. The skills you're building, the habits you're reinforcing, the identity you're leaning into. If it all is tied to one version of you, one role, one path, then when it changes, it's going to hit harder than it needs to. Right now, you need to be asking questions that keep your future wider than where you're at today. Remember, none of this is about getting it perfect. It's about not avoiding the questions just because they're hard to accept. So if you want more of this, more depth, more structure, and more information, I put out a weekly newsletter that breaks down the topics, a lot like this one. Additional insights that help you think about and prepare better for your transition. There's a link in the show notes. If you want to go sign up, I'd appreciate it. At some point, this stops being just about transition. It turns into something more significant than that. It shows up in the way you make decisions, what you avoid, what you assume will work itself out. The questions you've been asking, they've probably been working for you. They got you to where you are right now. But what got you here isn't automatically going to carry you forward the same way. So you do need to notice where you're staying comfortable in how you think and where you're choosing not to look too closely. So the next time you catch yourself asking something that feels easy, something that keeps everything intact, pause for a second and ask yourself what you're not asking. You might not need to answer it at that moment. Just don't let it pass by like it doesn't matter. Thanks for staying till the end. Staying all the way through helps the engagement ratings. Please send me your comments. Be honest with what you like, what I'm doing wrong, anything that you want me to be aware of, so that I can make changes best to benefit you. Also, please share the podcast with anyone who you think would enjoy it or benefit from it. And if you're not already, please follow the new podcast, Your Next Objective. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.